Honestly, thank you. Good to see you again. Those guys make all this possible. So our first panel, and I'll start with introductions. My name is JD McCormick, and I'm the chairman of American Healthy Alternatives Association. To my right, starting with April, April Byrd is one of our lobbyists in North Carolina for our North Carolina Healthy Alternatives State Chapter. Cynthia Cabrera, Chief Strategy Officer at Hometown Hero, to her right. She's been advocating in Texas and really taken Texas by the horns. And then to her right is Philip Snow, General Counsel for MC Nutraceuticals and our Legislative Affairs Director. So we've got a great panel. We want to talk about the difference between reacting to legislation and legal matters in states and being proactive, and what that really looks like and how it affects our ability to do our job in saving the industry. So I want to start with Cynthia. You've been in this fight in Texas with Hometown Hero for years at this point, including the famous lawsuit, Saving Texas, back in 2021. Thank you guys very much for that. We're seeing a lot of activity regarding Texas hemp politics recently, but I think our audience really would benefit from knowing how long Hometown Hero has been lobbying, and to get a feel for the monies you all and others have expended lobbying in the second largest state in the country.
Thank you, JD. So Hometown Hero was founded in 2015, and it started out as a vape company, nicotine-based products, and then it moved into the CBD space, which eventually morphed into the hemp-derived cannabinoid company that it is now. And lobbying started in 2019. In 2019, the Texas legislature passed HB 1325, and somebody at the company, it was a great thing. Texas was very proactive. I don't want to say that Texas didn't do a good job. They were very proactive. They passed regulations for consumable hemp products. They didn't get everything quite right, but they did a good job in 2019. Everything went well. And in 2021, the state decided that they would ban the products. And so Hometown Hero got sucked into a lawsuit and basically defending the state almost single-handedly in terms of lobbying. And so Texas has a session every other year. So we had to bring out teams. We had 3 teams in 2021 and 2023. This year we have the same 3, we have 3 teams. They're not exactly the same anymore. But
this is politics after all.
It is politics after all, yes. And so the space in Texas is super interesting because it is a very large market, to your point. And what we're dealing with in Texas is that there are some people who dislike the particular product. I've never dealt with a legislature that just, and I used to be in the vape space. That's where we started, is in the vape space. And it wasn't even the same way in the vape space. You get to the hemp cannabinoid space, and suddenly legislators are not doing the will of the people. They are doing what feels good for them. And that is what we're facing in Texas. In addition to which, we have, there are 3 medical marijuana license holders in Texas. Texas is a very restricted medical marijuana market. There are only 3 license holders. The largest holds 70% of the market and is actively campaigning against the hemp-derived cannabinoids. In fact, and I'll tell you about it later, but he did a presentation this morning just talking about the hemp industry in Texas, and it was so amazing because it was live streamed on LinkedIn, but we could comment. And so Lucas is our CEO, yes, it was a bad idea for them. Lucas and I were commenting while this was going on, and he just talked about how Texas is a terrible state and there's just no regulation and the products are terrible and it's gas station this. And so, we jump into the comments and correct it and that kind of thing. But this is what we're dealing with because he's managed to align with the handful of legislators who don't want the products. So this works for them. Yeah. So they've created this little state-sponsored monopoly to try and just take down the hemp side.
Well, I just want to ask, we should give Hometown Hero and Cynthia a huge round of applause. Without them, the state of Texas. Honestly, without them, I've done a lot of research in Texas, and without them, that market would not exist in the hemp space. So many thanks to Cynthia and Hometown. Philip, although you are one of the most proactive advocates and attorneys in the hemp space, can you illustrate what it was like to react to law enforcement raids in South Carolina, where we had no real advocacy infrastructure. We didn't have lobbyists, we didn't have really well-known attorneys.
That's a great question, and I think one of the main themes of this panel is the idea of being proactive versus reactive, and we suffered from that greatly in South Carolina. As a former South Carolina resident who spoke with members of the legislature, and I was told that you can keep your devil's lettuce out of our state house, I kind of knew that it was going to be a little bit of a rough battle, but these certain pockets of renegade sheriffs, in Greenville County and in some other counties in the state, decided to take it upon themselves to say that anything that was psychoactive, whether that be banning by alphabet soup or acronym, whatever you want to refer to it as, they decided to start conducting raids. One of these individuals that they raided certainly had probably more than a few other things going on than operating a legitimate hemp store within the state. But the influence of law enforcement, just continued to grow and grow and grow. And that influence is something that is felt even within the halls of the State House in Columbia, South Carolina. They have essentially their thumb on, not just the scales of justice, but the governor, on the attorney general, and things like that. And so going in to try to regulate hemp, whether that be hemp-derived products such as Delta 8, Delta 10, things like that, or even just have a, common sense conversation about it, typically is, it's an uphill battle. So I think when you're forced into a reactive position, generally speaking, that's when you have to start doing positive or trying to do positive PR. And I think once you find yourself in a PR narrative, you're already losing. So I think that when you fall behind the eight ball, you really have, you're starting to throw Hail Marys, and we've seen that in South Carolina, we've seen that in a few other states. As Cynthia mentioned, once a legislature or people that have the ears of legislators make up their mind about a certain type of product, whether that be a delivery mechanism or the product contents, it's very hard to shift that narrative. So I think that once you find yourself in a reactive position, it's very unfortunate. And
well, in Greenville specifically, Greenville, South Carolina, law enforcement and sheriffs raided several stores, and we had no real lobbyists, no real legislative connections there. And so coming into South Carolina, we were already, caught with our pants down, as it were. We had to immediately hire staff, hire lobbyists, consultants, attorneys, and address the situation in real time without having any real on-the-ground knowledge of what the thoughts and feelings were of legislators and other law enforcement officials.
Well, and that's exactly right, because, I don't want to necessarily say it happened overnight, but it certainly happened within a very short amount of time. And I recall having a conversation with the Attorney General for the state of South Carolina, and said, these are some sensible regulations that we want to try to put into place. We're having issues in Greenville County. Is there anything that you can do to help us? And he said, well, son, it is pretty difficult to kind of put the crap back in the horse. A, the horse isn't going to like it very much, and B, it's going to get kind of messy. But he said, but I'm happy to help however I can. So, certainly there was an approach to this that maybe next session we're going to have some progress made in Columbia. But I think when you have these things happen so quickly and don't have any existing legislative contacts, whether that be lobbying, whether that be attorneys that are very familiar with the issue, active industry participants that are somewhat involved and engaged in the political game, you're going to be caught on the back foot.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's, unfortunately what we saw, happen in the Palmetto State, and, certainly not to the north, and I'm assuming you're going to get to April next,
Yep.
but, it's something entirely night and day different than what we saw in a state like North Carolina.
It's a great segue. So again, just to reintroduce April, April's one of our lobbyists in North Carolina. North Carolina has been an amazing state politically for hemp, and I think the audience would all agree that it's one of the best states for business in the hemp industry. Can you describe your experience in working closely with the association and being proactive over the last few years in that state, and how it's gotten us to almost the cusp of some of the best hemp legislation in the nation.
So I think the key, hello? I hate microphones. And speaking in public. Anyways, I think the key in North Carolina, what really helped us was being proactive. And we went to, I remember, we were kind of identifying bill sponsors, and we went to Representative McNeely and sat down and told him we wanted to regulate an industry that wasn't regulated. And it's, for those of you who don't know, North Carolina has a supermajority Republican-led legislature in both chambers, in the House and the Senate. So it's a whole lot of Republicans. And they're not, by their nature, they're not very keen on regulating industries. And what they normally hear from businesses and industries is that we want less regulation, like we're over-regulated. So once you got over the initial shock of, yes, this is an industry coming to you that is currently not regulated at all, and we want to regulate the industry. We don't want to over-regulate it, we don't want to go crazy. We want to put in, common sense regulations with regards to packaging, age restriction, testing requirements, pretty common sense, straightforward things. We kind of really blew their mind when we said that we would be open to a tax, because that's the other thing that businesses never come to the government and ask for. And I think that kind of put us ahead of the game. We do have a member who refers to anything related to hemp and cannabis as devil's lettuce. And oddly enough, though, he's one of the co-sponsors on our regulatory bill. So it's kind of, he realized that not going to get rid of it, it's here, might as well regulate it and make sure that kids are safe. And so I think that's what really got us off on the right foot, is we were incredibly proactive. It gave us a lot of input and influence on the bill, and we passed the House with unanimous support.
And I think one of the things I wanted to illustrate here, proactive versus reactive. When you're proactive, the legislature, law enforcement, the attorney general, these people are more likely to work with you through some of these headings, right? These products are coming out of a 100-year prohibition. We're not coming to them with medical, then recreational models with limited licenses. The cat's out of the bag. And I like Philip and South Carolina Attorney General's take on it. The crap's out of the horse. And if you're proactive and you actually have real conversations with these people, it's a lot more likely that you're going to have an easier time conducting your business, right, over the long term. And I think, antithetical to the Republican position, some regulations in this space are a good thing. Because we're coming out of a 100-year prohibition, and there are no regulations in many states, having some testing standards is actually really, really great. Cynthia, one of my questions to you, and I think looking forward, many people, this would be helpful for folks in Texas specifically, what do you anticipate the regulations looking like, or some of the language of the bill looking like in Texas over the next 6 months?
Thank you for that question, because you jumped ahead. I don't know if you saw me jumping up and down here. Wanted to say something. And you touched on something about being proactive. And what's interesting is, and I think that people need to remember, is you have to read the room. Who is your audience? What are these legislators like? And I referenced earlier that in Texas, for example, a handful of legislators are controlling the fate, or attempting to control the fate, of an entire industry. And Texas is a very conservative state, very business friendly. Come and take it from me. The whole deal. Very independent. I love it. And those legislators don't like this thing. That handful of legislators don't like this thing. And Texas is an interesting state because the lieutenant governor in Texas is more powerful than the governor because he also controls the Senate. So pretty much in Texas, the Senate will do, for the most part, what the lieutenant governor wants, right? So this is and again, going back to being proactive and reading the room, who are your legislators? Where are, who's got the strength? Where are the fault lines? What can you do with it? That kind of thing. We keep our lobbyists engaged year-round, even though Texas has session every other year. We keep our lobbyists, obviously, they're not doing that much, but we're always in contact and that kind of thing. And in Texas, we do have regulation, and they did do a good job. The only thing that they were missing was child-resistant packaging and an age gate. And just to illustrate the point of how if something, they don't want something to happen, it won't happen, we introduced an age bill last year, which was a 21 and over with an exemption for veterans between the ages of 18 and 21. And we introduced that, that was all that was in the bill. And it got zero traction. We had, I don't know, a handful of sponsors on it, and that was it. And Texas had over 7,000 bills introduced, and a little over 700 were passed. So getting something done, like what gets the attention of the legislature, is also important. So Texas only needs a couple of things. If we took it from regulation and we put it into statute, that would be helpful. We added in the child-resistant packaging and the age gate, and we're good to go. Like, nothing else needs to be done. And also, just on the point of taxation, we did, and anybody who knows me knows that I am. JD's laughing. Okay, all my friends are laughing because they know how I feel about taxation. And we talked about taxation with the Lieutenant Governor's office last session. And basically they said, Texas has so much money, we don't need your taxes.
That's amazing.
So that was not a negotiated point.
Yeah, to anyone that doesn't know Cynthia, one of my favorite things to do is when I introduce her to someone, is to ask her feelings on taxation, and she has an amazing 5-minute pitch on why we don't need taxes, and I love that. No, but you know, I think to your point, introducing a bill that's well-intentioned, 21 plus, right? It makes sense, right? Alcohol and so many other things, nicotine, 21 plus, and we couldn't get traction on that, and some of that is for political reasons. They don't want to give us what we want, so then they can use it against us later to hammer us. Philip, I know that you've been working really closely with April in North Carolina. As an attorney and as an advocate working directly with businesses, what's been your experience in working directly with legislators and engaging in drafting language and understanding proactivity versus reactivity?
It's a great question, and you know, April's been an absolute joy to work with because, you know, she's well spoken despite her hatred for public speaking, but April's really friendly and gets me into a lot of doors to have a lot of conversations with legislators within North Carolina. But I think, you know, anytime you're looking at a piece of legislation, you have to understand, as Cynthia said, you know, kind of read the room. You know, and your room is a function of, you know, the businesses that are asking for regulation, you know, because there's always going to be bad actors, there's always going to be people that don't want to be regulated in any way, shape, or form. But by and large, you know, most of the people that are in this for the long term realize the value of being regulated, regardless of your sentiments of being taxed. You know, when something is being taxed, you know, it's very hard to have it taken away from you. But, you know, understand, you know, what your audience wants. Understand, you know, where they're willing to make concessions, whether that be reasonable milligram cap restrictions on certain types of products, whether that be getting rid of certain chemical compounds, you know, and agreeing to make some concessions along the way, because at the end of the day, you know, most of the legislators that you speak to are real estate people or former pig farmers or car salesmen. You know, these aren't exactly chemists, nor are they people that have been operating in the cannabinoid or hemp space, let alone the ag space. So, you know, having conversations with them, you have to be able to give them real-time information that is digestible. And I don't want to go so far as to say, you know, anytime you write anything or present something to someone, it has to be at a 2nd to 3rd grade level. But starting at that level helps you build these conversations, and you know, the efforts of lobbyists, you know, help you get in the doors to have those conversations. So working with, you know, members of the hemp business community in the state of North Carolina, we decided, you know, what really matters to us is, you know, the ability to sell these products to people over the age of, originally it was 18 in North Carolina because they were one of the last holdout states in the country that required 18 plus for tobacco purchases. That got changed this year. You know, what cannabinoids are really issues. You know, as a North Carolina state senator said to me last year, you know, son, tell me about all these delters. What's going on with the delters? I said, well, Senator, let me sit here and talk about this. So I think you have to understand, you know, what your intended audiences, you have to read the room on both sides. You know, where are your pressure points? You know, what does the industry want to be able to sell? What concessions are they willing to make? And ultimately, that helps inform, you know, the legislation that you put in front of people. You know, you're going to have certain champions, effective lobbyists. You know, someone I was having dinner with last night said, you know, I want a lobbyist who's always running. I want someone who is doing something every single day, and that I can know, okay, where are we falling behind? You know, where are we succeeding? What do we need to fix? How do we need to get better? And you know, those lobbyists are going to be able to tell you, okay, this person cares about X, Y, and Z issues. This person doesn't want to talk to you about, you know, A, B, and C. You know, don't ever mention pig farming or watermelons or whatever it might be. And then, you know, you're going to find yourself in a much better place with them. So having those lobbyists that know how to read the room and that know you're never going to get this past this guy. He's, you know, a former pediatrician. I mean, well, good luck with anything that doesn't include child-resistant packaging. You know?
Exactly.
So understanding that is critical in, you know, getting successful legislation passed, and that ultimately can, you know, balance consumer safety with, you know, the demands of the marketplace that continues to evolve under the, you know, guidance of the 2018 Farm Bill.
Yeah. You bring up a great point. So April, as a lobbyist, I first want to make a joke. How does it feel being known as the hemp person to your local legislators?
I mean, sorry. It's a nice change from, you know, the gambling person. So basically now I'm just one of those sin lobbyists.
So you're just a sin lobbyist.
I am a sin lobbyist. I think I need like a liquor.
The sin industries. So another great point that I think Philip brought up is legislators are looking for subject matter experts. And I think there's this like kind of overall thought, maybe for people that don't interact with the government, that they know everything. Many legislators really only know a couple of subjects. It's their, you know, maybe they're an engineer. They know civil engineering really well, but they don't know anyone that knows chemical engineering, or they don't know hemp, right? So they need subject matter experts. And I think I would love to hear it from your perspective when a legislator comes to you and they're interested in the hemp subject, what that interaction is like on your end to say, hey, I can bring you the subject matter experts. What subject matter expertise are you looking for?
Right. So I think that's why we've had so much success, at least from North Carolina Healthy's perspective, is, you know, we came to them and said, this is what, you know, we want to regulate the industry, we want to work with you on the regulations. And whenever they had questions, I'm the first to say I know a lot about it. Like, I know a little about a lot, probably just enough to be dangerous, but I know who to go to, who has the answers, and who can get to the weeds. And so anytime, whether it was the majority leader, whether it was, you know, our Senate champions, if they had questions, we got them answers, and not just like in a couple of days, but like, you know, within a couple of hours of them asking the question. And so that gave us a level of expertise and credibility that we were able to see language before it went in front of a committee. We were able to make tweaks throughout the process. We got a heads up when there were going to be amendments that we weren't going to like, with the understanding that I know you're going to change this when it gets to the other chamber. And it really was, you know, kind of from the get-go, kind of establishing North Carolina Healthy and the guys that make it up as the content matter experts.
Yeah.
And so, and that's one of the things, and I think I've said it to clients before, you don't have to pass an IQ test to be elected to public office. There's a lot of folks who think that our elected officials know so much, and you'd be horrified to know how little they know. Especially when you get to your local, probably even worse at the federal level. But so they depend on lobbyists for about 85–90% of what goes into law. Was not the brain trust of a member who sponsored the legislation. It was the lobbyists who went to them and wanted to work on legislation.
Yeah.
And so I think for us, it was beneficial because there's amazing people that are part of American Healthy and North Carolina Healthy Alternatives. And so it kind of established us out of the gate as the experts. And because there have been others who have tried to come into our nice little working group that have wanted to tweak things under false pretenses. And because of that relationship we established early on, we've been able to stop, you know, the harm that some wanted to inflict.
Oh, absolutely. I once heard from a legislator, and I find it to be pretty true all around the country, that nothing in a legislature happens by accident, right? There's often someone from the other side pushing a narrative or pushing an agenda. At the end of the day, the United States is a gigantic economy with lots of interest from all over the world really trying to influence us. Cynthia, I would love, just because you're one of my favorite fighters on the planet, I would love to hear about your most recent kind of tit for tat in Texas, again with those medical marijuana operators, right? What is your position to push back on them to say, hey, listen, we don't need negative legislation to ban hemp. We don't need limited licenses and only the medical model. We've got 10,000 plus stores in Texas, right? You know, I know that I'll be supporting American Healthy, will be supporting you and Hometown Hero moving forward, but in the next 60 days, what do you think your plan or the plan should be for people to organize in Texas, and what ideas should they be thinking about?
Well, there was a lot in that
I'm
question.
sorry.
So I'll start with the marijuana folks.
Yeah.
So marijuana folks don't love us,
Right.
and by us I mean the hemp space. Hometown Hero, you know, our CEO and I, we've started doing these videos, and a lot of times we are just ragging on the marijuana people because so I'll take it back to your thing about Texas. So Texas Original, call them out by name, they own 70% of the medical marijuana market in Texas. This company made a plea to the state that they cannot make money because hemp products exist. So the option of changing their business model didn't come up. The option of expanding the program didn't come up. What needs to happen, according to them, is that the hemp industry needs to be eliminated or severely restricted because they're having trouble making money. And the problem with these state-sponsored monopolies, where they only issue 2 or 3 licenses or whatever, is that they are monopolies. And Texas is a free country, right? Texas acts like its own country, it's a free country, and people should be able to sell whatever it is that they want to sell, and people want to buy it, and we sell to adults. And so the idea that the marijuana industry or a medical marijuana company could drive the narrative for and it was 2022 when they came up with the $8 billion economic impact number, but the idea that a medical marijuana company could dictate what happens to an industry that employs tens of thousands of people is unbelievable.
Almost single-handedly.
Almost single-handedly.
One company using lobbying and legislative awareness to push out thousands of operators.
And just to show you how insidious the political system is, and it's not just Texas, it's every state, the federal government, this is how it works. I actually have a friend named Jeff who owns a very big hemp company, and he said to me a couple years ago, he said, how can a legislator who's never run a business pass laws about the business? And I'm like, welcome to politics.
Well,
But,
football guys.
yeah, in Texas, the lieutenant governor issued interim charges, meaning this is what they're going to focus on. This is what the Senate in Texas is going to focus on in the next legislative session. And banning Delta 8 and Delta 9 products was one of those things. So they had a special hearing to discuss banning Delta 8 and Delta 9 products. Philip came into town for that. So he was there, he witnessed it firsthand. We were supposed to go first. We waited 8 hours, almost 9 hours for our hearing because they put us to the back of the line. So we had to wait. We were at the Capitol all day. And this was a hearing about banning Delta 8 and Delta 9 products. And more than half of it was devoted to expanding the medical marijuana program. So if you wanted to expand the medical marijuana program, why don't you just have a hearing about that?
Right.
They trotted out all these people who were in support of medical marijuana, but not hemp products. All the experts that they brought up to speak were all in favor of medical marijuana and only had horror stories to share about hemp. Nothing to back them up. Oh,
Teenagers.
yes, they had a teenager who came up and just talked about how terrible drugs are and the state shouldn't. I mean, this kid was couched. It was just terrible. It was just a terrible show. But the point is that the medical marijuana company had a podium to speak at the hemp hearing. How is that even possible that the medical marijuana guys got more time to speak than the hemp people did? So the point is that this is how politics work, and the medical and the recreational marijuana industry is driving a lot of the narrative to wipe out the hemp industry. In Texas, in the next couple of months, people need to join our local association, which is the Texas Hemp Business Council. They need to get in touch with each other and strengthen numbers and start getting ready, because we have a very big fight ahead of us. The lawsuit that has kept every single business in Texas since 2021, that's our lawsuit, which supports the entire state, is probably going to go to trial at the same time that we end up back in legislative session. So it is going to be a very, very busy time of year. So if anybody wants to help, support, needs information, please let me know.
It's the Texas Hemp Business
Council.
Do you know what the website is?
TexasHempBusinessCouncil.com.
TexasHempBusinessCouncil.com.
Jay, did you mind if I ask Cynthia a quick
Yeah,
question?
go ahead, please.
So, having been through it all, well, I mean, this day, as I say, another day in the tailgate, they're all different. But legislation versus litigation, speaking of proactive versus reactive, I mean, let's talk about that.
Great question.
From your experience.
Who's the moderator?
No, I just think it's an important line to talk about, because people can spend tons and tons of money on litigation and there's no guaranteed outcomes. In your experience, do you think lobbying is a far more effective way of getting what you want, or do you think again, proactive versus reactive?
Well, we're back to reading the room, right? And I think that the circumstances matter. Sometimes legislatively, you can get what you want, but look at New York. 20-something lawsuits in New York because OCM is such a disaster. In Texas, we had to sue because it was the only option. We had gotten through the legislative session and then they tried to ban it anyway. So suing was the only option. When we sued in Arkansas, and thank you, support to American Healthy Alternatives for supporting that, and everybody else who supported that. When we sued there, it wasn't because Arkansas was a big state for us, because it was like 27 or 28 on our list of, in terms of revenue, but it was the principle of the thing, because once one state goes down with bad regulation, then all the other ones domino. We're talking about a lawsuit in Louisiana because they just passed a bill that cuts out all the convenience stores. So in Texas, I think that the court might have been waiting for the legislature to make a decision, and maybe the legislature was waiting for the court to make a decision, and kind of like the FDA and Congress, the kind of back and forth kind of thing. And luckily for us, the state of Texas has lost a ton of attorneys, and so every time they lose an attorney, they ask for an extension, which we grant. We're okay with it. So I think that it depends on the state. In Louisiana this past session, I personally spoke to a legislator with my lobbyist, and he said, I just don't like your products. We have medical marijuana, they have one license holder in Louisiana. He said, I don't like your products, and if we're gonna have marijuana in the state, then we might as well just legalize or expand the medical program and not have these hemp products. And he was gotten to by the medical people. They passed this bill to severely restrict what goes on in Louisiana. So you have to decide whether whether you have an option. In New York, the only option is to sue. You're never going to get anything done with the legislature there, right?
Yeah.
Texas, we'll see. If we can get something into statute, maybe the state drops its case.
Yep.
They have to drop it because we're not going to drop it.
I think speaking of, situational awareness, what I find incredibly odd is that the marijuana industry is using the exact same language, right? That whether it's, all the different interest groups that were against marijuana, that prohibitionist language that was used against marijuana for 30 years, they're using it against us now. Like, we are this big scary boogeyman, when in fact, we're just a small business version of them, right? We're fighting for our lives.
How come they don't call it intoxicating marijuana?
Nope. Yeah.
I was actually trying to get that going. You know, you guys are selling your intoxicating medical marijuana. Let's
In
get
the
that
gray
off the
market.
ground. Yeah.
In the
Yeah,
gray market.
I was on a call with a bunch of medical cannabis folks, and it is the gray market.
The gray market.
Yes, hemp is no longer the hemp industry or intoxicating, it's a gray market.
Yeah.
My new pet peeve, and Lucas and I talk about, like, it's like 11:30 at night and we're just like complaining to each other on the phone, you know? And it's, so suddenly the marijuana market, which is federally illegal, and I don't care what anybody thinks about marijuana. I'm like, do you? I don't care. I think all drugs should be legal. So I don't care. The marijuana industry is federally illegal, and somehow the talking points have become that the marijuana industry is regulated cannabis, but somehow hemp is the intoxicating hemp market that operates in a gray space. Excuse me.
Excuse me. Excuse me. If there's ever been an example of a gray market, it's a Schedule I controlled substance.
That's what I would like to know, like how do you have a gray market for a product? And I don't want to hear about the loopholes and all that stuff, like it's in statute.
Yes.
It's been in statute since 2018. It's a legal market. The fact that states haven't regulated it by now, well then, that's kind of on them. And I think from an industry, it's good to be proactive.
Agreed.
But it's like, how can a gray market, a legal market that's federally legal in all 50 states, like you can order it and have it delivered to your house.
Yep.
How that's a gray market, I haven't quite figured out. That was the latest I've heard from the cannabis, because the cannabis folks, I mean, they tried in North Carolina to.
Yeah.
The marijuana folks have great talking points.
Great talking points.
And to be fair, they've been at this for 50, 60 years.
Yep.
They've gotten very good, and they've developed relationships, and they did not see the hemp market coming out of nowhere and exploding the way it did, in a good way. They didn't see it, and so rather than shift to the hemp side, although some of them have, and they do it with caveats and a lot of equivocation, but rather than just come on board to the hemp space, they look at the sunk cost fallacy of their business, and they're like, well, we already invested so many millions, we have to just wipe out hemp instead.
That's I think my biggest pet peeve here is nothing is preventing any of these large multi-state operators from just opening an LLC and starting a hemp company.
Yeah.
Why do you have to use legislation to destroy our industry? I don't understand that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves. We've got about 1 minute left. I think Texas, in my personal opinion, is going to be one of the biggest legislative fights coming up. And I think everybody should direct their resources, their questions, anything they need for Texas-related legislative issues to the Texas Hemp Business Council. And that's also the TexasHempBusinessCouncil.com as their website. I really want to say thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to the audience today. If you guys have any questions, pull us off to the side. We'll be happy to answer them. We'll get ready for our next panel.